Buffett sold over 80% of his shares in TSMC in the most recent 30F filing. Although this is a rare situation, it has happened before with Verizon shares. Buffett first started accumulating Verizon shares in Q3 of 2020, then sold his majority stake in Verizon in Q1 of 2022.
In a similar vein, Buffett first bought 60 million shares of TSMC in Q3 of 2022, and this accounts for 1.39% of his portfolio. In the next quarter, however, he sold 86% of his portfolio. And if you were to look at the share price of TSMC, you can see that during the buy period, which is from July to around September, the buy price is somewhere between $75 to $90, whereas during the sell period, which is from October to December of 2022, we can see that the low is around $60 with a high of $80. So from this we can know that even though there's a really small window in which Buffett could have been profitable from this investment, it's very likely that he made a loss on his TSMC bet. So there's been much speculation as to who made this bet. Was it done by Buffett himself or one of his top lieutenants, Ted or Todd? If I were to make a guess, I would say that it was done by Buffett himself. Buffett once said in an interview that Ted and Todd each manages $10 billion for Berkshire, and 60 million TSMC shares will translate to about $4.1 billion and accounts for over 40% of Ted and Todd's portfolio. In my humble opinion, I think that 40% for one particular company is too much for a portfolio.
So I guess what most of you guys will be interested in is to why Buffett sold TSMC after holding for just one quarter. But before I reveal my speculations, let's take a step back and revisit the reason as to why Buffett bought TSMC in the first place.
Okay, so let's take a look at this bar graph. This bar graph shows the semiconductor foundry business broken down by different companies. You can see that the red bar, which represents TSMC, is holding steady at about 55 to 60%. What's more is that TSMC and Samsung are the only two foundry companies that are able to produce the 3nm chip, which is typically used in high-end applications such as supercomputers and data centers. What's more is that TSMC's yield for the 3nm chip is at around 70 to 80%, whereas the yield for Samsung's 3nm chip is very low at around 10 to 20%. So with these two pieces of information, you can see that TSMC has some sort of moat, and it also could be a reason why as to Buffett bought TSMC in the first place.
So why did Buffett sell TSMC if TSMC has a moat? I believe it's because some new information arose in Q4 of 2022, and in light of this new information, Buffett decided that something fundamental has changed with the business and decides to let go of his stake in TSMC.
So let's take a look at this piece of news, and this is a piece of news that came from the US Bureau of Industry and Security. It's a very long article, but what it's essentially saying is that the US is trying to place sanctions on China, particularly in the semiconductor space, in order to restrict China's ability to obtain high-end chips, particularly those that are used in supercomputers, data centers, as well as China's ability to manufacture high-end semiconductors. What is very interesting is the date in which this news was announced, because this is on October 7 of 2022, which is Q4, and this coincides with Buffett's decision to sell TSMC shares. So I don't really know what Buffett saw from this piece of news, but I'm guessing it has something to do with the geopolitical risk associated with TSMC. Even though we don't really know what is the percentage of revenue coming out of China, it's safe to assume that it's not an insignificant amount. What's more is that TSMC is building another fab in Arizona, US, and they will be spending $40 billion. We know that the operating costs in US will be way more expensive than in other parts of the world, such as China or Taiwan. With higher operating costs, definitely TSMC's margin will be compressed and could even lead to a disappearing moat. We know that in semiconductor manufacturing space, specifically in the high-end semiconductor manufacturing space, it is very competitive. Rivals such as Samsung and Intel could quickly capitalize on this geopolitical risk that they may not be exposed to bring down prices and compete with TSMC and even gain market share from TSMC.